Welcome to Voices of Resistance. You are listening to WRUU-LP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with a global soul.
The viewpoints expressed in the following program are not necessarily those of WRUU, the license holder, or the staff.
I'm Barbara Humphrey, co-host of today's show.
And I'm Albert Strickland, co-host of today's show.
Voices of Resistance is a project of the Savannah Justice and Peace Collective. We give voice to those who have no voice in mainstream media and present a wide range of issues that affect us all. As you listen, please think about the voices of resistance you would like to hear on this show and email us at voicesofresistance@gmail.com or visit our Facebook page and leave us comments. Thanks to those of you who turned in to our last show, a discussion of colonization and brief introduction to decolonization. Today, we continue with our discussion of decolonization. Laurel Shadley will talk about decolonization from an American indigenous perspective. Laura, can you introduce yourself and how you are rediscovering, and tell us how you are rediscovering your indigenous heritage, how it was taken from you, and how you are taking it back?
Hi, I'm Laura Shadley from the Klamath, Wasco, Shasta, Pitt River tribes of Oregon and Northern California. And that's a very long question. Can you repeat that for me, please?
Well, could you tell us how you are rediscovering your indigenous heritage, how it was taken from you, and how you're taking it back?
How am I rediscovering? It's been a long process, I think. Something that I have been... It's a really hard question.
Okay, well, we can move on. Maybe you can think about it. It'll come up later in the conversation. So we start by just briefly talking about colonization. First, the process of colonization and its results. For North American indigenous people, we can use the term, we came, we saw, we conquered, we killed. Driven by capitalism, imperialism, and greed. Gold, glory, and God. The process of colonization is newcomers traveling to a land with the intent to stay and replicate the culture they left behind, destroying what they, quote, discovered, unquote. Taking the land by driving indigenous people out, killing the people. In the case of the U.S. indigenous population, going from 100% to 0.9% in 2017. In actions such as the Trail of Tears and the destruction of culture, such as removal of children from indigenous families to place in American families and send to Indian schools.
And it all started with a ship on a shore and a bunch of turkeys, apparently. So if a pilgrim invites you to dinner, don't go.
Thank you for that those wise words. So we think a little bit about the people who were caught up in that and what it's like today, the alienation of people being caught between two worlds, two cultures. We think about the current tribes governed by a council and a council president who is owned, controlled, and paid for by the U.S. government or the U.S. Department of Interior, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, or in Canada, the Department of Indian Affairs. The BIA holds U.S. indigenous land in trust. Despite what we've heard, it is not owned by the tribes. The money comes from the U.S. government to the tribes. However, it's very often the tribal council that disperses the funds, and even though the people are supposed to decide how the funds get dispersed, as we know, that isn't always the case. The system of disbursement is riddled with mismanagement and scandal.
In fact, these reservations, according to Russell Means, I listened to something he said the other day, and it was really, it hit on really important to me, because he said that the tribal lands are nothing more than distribution centers back to white America, because the tribes have no industry, have no jobs, they have no stores, they have nothing. So all the quote-unquote welfare that they receive has to be spent in the towns surrounding reservations for the most part. So it's just a way of funneling money back into the white society through reservations, which are little more than concentration camps in anyway. You know, there really is no ownership of the land, as she said, because the land is held in trust by the U.S. government, which means the tribes have the land, but they don't own the land. It can be revoked, as in the termination policies, which they're still trying to do at this very minute, still trying to get tribes to terminate because of the resources that we so greedily want.
And 140 years ago, the Dawes Act terminated reservations to assimilate indigenous people into the whole society and take the reservation land for further settlement and resource extraction. Today, shockingly, more non-indigenous people live on reservations than indigenous people. And this according to the Oxford University Press Academic Insights for the Thinking World.
What do you think of that, Laura? The fact that there are more white people living on reservation land than indigenous people.
Oh, well, I mean, colonialism worked, obviously. It did its job.
Yes, it did.
Yeah, when I was growing up in Klamath Falls and Chiloquin, Chiloquin was part of just a small part of our land that we had originally before colonization, and it just became increasingly smaller and smaller. And it was a mixture of different people, mostly white and indigenous, my family. So it was a very strange place to grow up in, knowing that was the land of my people, but really not really having a solid idea of the culture that came from that land, because we weren't taught our culture when I was growing up. It wasn't as strong at the time that I was growing up because of colonization. There was a lot of alcoholism, a lot of suicides, violence, many things that were going on that were keeping us from getting back to our cultural ways. So that's what I experienced growing up.
Now, most of us can't even imagine what a reservation is or what it feels like to you. You were there. You've been on the reservation. Describe briefly, like the opportunities for anything. As I said before, Russell Means with the grocery stores, all the money that's spent there. Is it spent anywhere near the reservation, or does it really go out to the small towns around, or out to the farms and that sort of thing?
Well, with the Klamath Agency, which is the reservation, that was absolved back in '54, I believe. Mm-hmm. My father was about 9 years old. He was born on the Klamath Agency, which was the reservation at the time. But when I was growing up, there was no reservation, but it was still the land that we was part of the reservation. So there were no native or indigenous-owned businesses that I was aware of. In Chiloquin, which was the place I spent most of my time, aside from Klamath Falls, there was a Clyde's Market, a gas station, a hardware store, a couple of other failed businesses in an area where they couldn't seem to thrive. The town is very small. A few restaurants along the highway, but nothing that I recognize as indigenous owned, because I don't think we were having those conversations when I was a kid. I didn't ask those questions. I was just kind of simply placed in a situation, and that's the way my life was. So we weren't having those discussions, those talks, or the questions weren't being asked. So there was just no knowledge being passed to us children. We just didn't know that there was any questions we should be asking,
So we know that colonization has left the reservations impoverished, which further drives the indigenous people to move to the cities, which further gives impetus to decommissioning reservations. We also know that much of the reservation land has been violated, particularly in recent years. Sacred sites have been violated for mineral extraction and pipelines. In fact, even though we know that the standing at Standing Rock, the water protectors did not stop the Dakota Access Pipeline from going through, and in fact, the water started flowing on Mother's Day on May.
The oil.
I think the oil. I'm sorry. The oil started flowing on Mother's Day, May 14th. And I was just reading today that they've already detected some leaks.
There were 2 leaks, but I don't think it wasn't flowing at the time it was leaking. I don't know what they were doing exactly.
Okay.
Maybe testing it out. Wasn't a whole lot of oil. It was enough to to let us know that, of course it's going to leak. Yeah, I don't know the exact date or if the oil is even flowing at this point.
Okay.
Yet, so.
Well, perhaps Standing Rock's greatest contribution is the awakening to colonization and the necessity to decolonize, if justice and peace are ever to be achieved. Laura, do you have any ideas about decolonization? We talked a little bit about it last week. What could possibly be done to decolonize? Do you have any ideas?
The word decolonization is really new to me. It's a new term. I kind of grew up with this intuitive understanding that something wasn't right with my the way I was growing up, the way I was learning. I disagreed with a lot of things, and I at the time didn't really understand why I was disagreeing. It was just this feeling I had in my heart that we were going about things wrong, even within our tribe, such as the casinos and other projects that we're still trying to implement now. So I really didn't have the language skills, and I'm still learning. Decolonization to me is, I guess when I hear the word, I think of my dad. And when I was growing up, my dad was a very broken man, and it was apparent to me all the time. But he would have these moments where he would break down and cry and say, "I want to take you and your sister back to the mountains and live in the old ways." And I think that was just something that stuck with me as a way to understand as a child that something was completely wrong with the way we were living, because who suffers like that if something wasn't terribly wrong with you? And it wasn't something that any of us could really describe or explain to each other, but we were just all very just struggled a lot and on so many levels to just exist at all. Every day was a struggle of something, or we were going through things that none of us really, like parents don't know how to explain these things to your children. If you're going through something and you don't understand that you have post-traumatic stress disorder from things that happened to your mother or your grandmother, things that are passed down, historical trauma that's passed down, you're just passing on these feelings and this indescribable pain to your children, and then your children are just growing up thinking, what is wrong with us? Why are we so why is it so difficult for us just to function in this society? And I think it's because we don't function in this society because this is not the society that we have created. This is something that was thrust upon us as a people when when settlers and colonizers came here to our land, and it's not something that is easily remedied when you can't even understand what it is that you're experiencing. When you have no words for it, how are you supposed to heal from something that you don't know how to describe to yourself or to anyone else? So,
yeah,
I think colonization is such an evil word, and there are very few places on the face of Earth where it has not occurred. Whether it's all throughout Africa, Asia, of course, this continent, and it's the complete destruction of life, period. The greeds that been the white supremacy, the patriarchal societies that rob society of its richness and its beauty. It just destroys everything. And the colonists who came here had no regard for life nor for the land. They saw this land, and we learned a new word today. This has been quite an experience. I have learned a lot doing this that I didn't know, and I thought I knew a lot. What is it? Terra nullius? Terra nullius?
Yes, terra nullius.
Right, which actually means a land without a people. So what happened is they landed, they saw people, but in order to justify what they were going to do, they had to make you know people, or the people that were here, make you not exist. You did exist, they knew that, but they had to make you less than human.
So we were savage.
You were savage.
Yes.
The noble savage is a cruel term. It just means you're not even really human in their estimation anyway. So that gives them justification to anything they want to do. So to steal land, to rape, pillage, plunder, and destroy across this country through terms like manifest destiny, what was the other one? Christian discovery.
The doctrine of Christian discovery.
Yeah, and so it's just such a horrible. It's been visited all over the earth. In fact, I still remember very poignantly, and I said this last week, I think, Cody Einards, when he said we've all been colonized.
Chase.
Chase. Now, I don't know where I get Cody from. I do know, but it's not it. Chase Einards, when we were at the University of America, the American University in D.C., when he said that we've all been colonized at some point, and that there is truth in that to some degree. But when we become the colonizer, that makes us twice, as bad because we know better. And to disregard life, more importantly, disregard the land, disrespect the land. We have no respect for the land. We never have had. We see something, we take it. If we have to dig up half the earth, it's okay. It's just okay. Gold, we need it. So the problem here, I think, was that when they discovered the South America, the natives there had all this gold, or the indigenous peoples had all this gold, and they had all these things, so their greed was highlighted. When they came here, there were no golden idols or beautiful temples or things to pillage. The only thing was the land, and they did a very good job at taking it. And that is a crime that I don't know how we could ever decolonize that sort of thing in a real effective way. There is a process of decolonization, and I think the crime now is that we're not even embarked on that yet as a people. My people, Irish, we were colonized by the English. The Romans tried but didn't make it, but the English did. And so we have to decolonize. Now, what would it take to decolonize in a sense of the word? I know we asked you that a moment ago. And you're very confused.
It's a hard question. What is to be done?
I think I can't speak for all Indigenous people on that. I have struggled a little bit back and forth with my own awakening as an Indigenous person. And I say that in a way that, it's not like I forgot that I was Indigenous. It's really difficult to be Indigenous when you have no one to teach you the language and your culture, and you're overwhelmed by this society, by this this world that has been created around us. And so the rediscovery, I guess, came when I met you, actually.
Oh my.
And I think you forced me in a way, and not forced, I don't want to say that, I don't want people to take that the wrong way. I think you had such an appreciation for who we were as Indigenous people, and it made me feel like it was okay for me to embrace that again. I think that after years of being away from, we left for so many reasons. My mother took us away when I was 10 because of a lot of the things that were happening in my family. We were very broken people, and it was really difficult to raise any children. And my mother's, she's of European descent. My grandfather's from Oklahoma. That's where he was born. And I don't remember how they came to Oregon, but my grandmother's from that area. I guess my mother was escaping many things, her own demons, as well as my father and our family. And it was a struggle between the families because there's a lot of racism still to this day in our hometowns, in our areas. So I think I kind of just walked away many, many times, and I tried to go back to being, or trying to rediscover that part of myself that never really truly left. My ancestors have always walked with me, and I think that that's the reason why I maintain some resistance, I guess.
Resistance.
Yes.
So decolonization, I'm thinking about decolonization, I'm thinking there's not really a way for us to go back, like when I was saying earlier, and I kind of, got off track, but my dad would cry, and I understood in a way that I think only a child can understand that pain of your parents suffering without the words. Just knowing that I didn't know anything because I didn't know the words. We weren't like I said, we didn't have those conversations. But it was something about the things my dad did say or didn't say that made me understand that it was about what happened to our people. That's why he suffered the way he did. I didn't know the story of my grandmother, who was a residential school survivor. She's still living, by the way. She's she left when she was 10, which I found really odd when I was thinking about it recently. I was taken away when I was 10 as well. And to have a living grandmother, someone who's still alive, she's a living history of decolonization directly. She can still tell those stories, and so that was really interesting. So I'm thinking about decolonization, but there's not any way to really go back to the way it was. So the life my dad cried for, I don't even know that he even experienced that kind of a life, because he was born in 45, so we had already been
our life had been colonized.
Yes, very much so.
The effect of the schools, the residential schools, stripping you of everything. I mean, a people, period, of who you are, of your culture. Not even you're allowed to keep your name, your traditions. You can't even speak your language or sing your songs. That is devastating to any people. And to have that happen, that's one of the great horrors of colonization, especially done to children, because you carry it forever. It's hard to get it out of your system, that this was done to you, and you did nothing to deserve that. So that was kind of hard, and you can't go back. I understand that. I don't like it, but I understand it because I have my own little cave picked out somewhere in this world, where I want to go back to this time. But I know that's impossible, and I remember. When I was in Colorado, I was reading everything I could get my hands on. Black Elk Speaks was one of my favorite at that time. And when I began to understand deeper, even as a child, 5, 6, 7 years old, I'd watch all those old 1950s cowboy and Indian movies that we watched. And I always hoped, because I didn't understand Hollywood, I always hoped that the right side was going to win. They never did. And in life, it seems as though, that's still being perpetuated. That's why we need to change it now. We need to make it so that all of us win. And we cannot win until we as white people understand what we've done.
Settlers.
Settlers. We're still settling, though. I mean, we're still doing it. It's not as though it's ended. If it had ended, we might have some sort of leg to stand on. But with termination and with what happened to your tribe and all, with your land, this, and what has been attempted to do with the water and all of these things. I mean, colonization is still happening. Settlers are still there. And that's the great horror. So to me, in order to decolonize, we have to start by admitting what we are doing, not what we did. We have to do that too. But we have to start with what we are doing at this minute and then go back and try and correct what we did and make amends for it through reparations, through land restoration, through any means we possibly can. But that's something that has to be done as a bare minimum, or we're never going to survive this, any of us, because this disrespect for the land and disrespect for people, it's going to end badly for all of us, not just for, your tribe or you, but for me and my grandchildren as well. So this is a very important issue, this decolonization and what it is. And Barbara and I spent a lot of time going over this. We've gone through a lot of readers. We've been reading a lot. It's just mind-boggling. I know that I can't know how you feel or how anyone feels because it wasn't done to me, because I can blend very easily as anyone. But to those, my ancestors who came here from Ireland, who spoke Irish, were automatically were mix or limeys, all these things, and we were badly treated. In fact, they would hire us for pennies what they wouldn't use slaves for, because slaves cost more money. An Irishman was nothing. You can find 100 of them trying to make a penny. So decolonization it should be the subject of what we're doing now and what it will take to make these reparations, because without the industry, without the funds that tribes need, they don't need to be taken care of. They need their own land, sovereign land. You don't have that. I know you call the natives nations, but they're not really. So that needs to be, to me, primary. The land has to be restored, and we have to honor the treaties. You know, if you go back, we might not go back to 1600. Otherwise, there's shipping companies are going to make a lot of money, because 300 million of us have to leave right away. You know, where the ship's going to take us.
I think that honoring the treaties is the least people can do, or the government can do. And then even that, I'm starting to really understand that it's just a piece of paper that we signed when we really didn't even understand what we were signing. I have no way to know what my ancestors understood at that time, or who was explaining what to them. And so when I'm thinking about treaties now, I'm just like, what good is it? And even then, you know, the treaties, when you signed a treaty, I mean, the land just kept shrinking, and the rights kept shrinking, and there was always a way around it anyway. So there's just, to me, it's just like a piece of paper that they'd signed to show that they, you know, they're these good men who try to make deals with these poor savage people, and you know, they're trying to show good faith that they're trying to work it out with us. And to me, it means nothing. It's a piece of paper that I can't even say what I really think, but yeah. So to me, I mean, when I'm thinking of the word decolonization, it's different for every indigenous person. There are people who really don't want anything to do with settlers at all. I think we'd like to go back to our land and be left alone completely. That's not going to happen, I don't think, obviously. And that's, I mean, in some parts of me, that's how I feel. I'm still angry because I'm learning all of these different lessons and all of these new the history that I never was allowed to learn. In school, I lived on my own land. I never learned one thing about my own tribes. I learned about the Sioux people, or, you know, the Nez Perce even, and I never learned one thing about the Klamath tribes or any of the other tribes that lived under my feet. You know, my ancestors, they attempted at one point, I think I was in 3rd grade, and they would pull me out of class, and we started reading this book that was more of like a generalized book about Native Americans in the whole country. I mean, that's as far as it got, as far as educating us. But yeah, I'm still angry. There's parts of me that I want to walk away from this civilization. I want to walk away from this society, and
I know where there's a good cave. Won't solve the problems. But
that's the part of me, that's the deeply indigenous, primal part of me that is ready to stand my ground and fight for something that my ancestors, they bled on this land.
No, it's true.
They bled this land red for me to be here. And when you told me that we were less than 1% of the population, that's really just kind of torn at me.
So when we go back to the question of what is to be done, we understand the answer cannot be nothing. That is not an acceptable response. So we're left with the question, what is to be done? And Albert's right. We've read a lot. We've listened to videos. We've looked at the idea of reparations, of restoration of land, going back to a period in time and saying from this time forward, the land that was in treaty has to be returned. And yet we know in our heart of hearts that the people out there who are sitting on this land are not willingly going to say, oh, yeah, sure, take it. We understand the wrongs we've done. What is to be done?
First is...
Okay, so what is to be done right now is to take a break and identify the station. So you are listening to WRUU-LP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with a global soul.
This portion of WRUU-LP Savannah Soundings programming is made possible by a grant from Sentient Bean, offering fair trade coffee, vegan and vegetarian food, and breakfast all day. Located at 13 East Park Avenue, across the street from the tennis courts at Forsyth Park. Our menu and special events listings can be found at sentientbean.com. If your business enjoys the programming on WRUU-LP, please support the station with a donation. Let your customers, neighbors, and friends know that you share our vision of building a thriving economy based on a diverse and vibrant community. Our listeners will know you support Savannah's only broad-based community radio station. Become a tower sponsor or underwriter. To check out the levels of corporate sponsorship and to donate, go to www.wruu.org/corporate. Again, to check out the levels of corporate sponsorship and to donate, go to www.wruu.org/corporate. Thank you for listening to and supporting WRUU-LP.
And we're back with Voices of Resistance. This is your co-hosts, Barbara Humphrey and Albert Strickland, and we're having a conversation with Laurel Shadley, a member of the Klamath tribe, about decolonization, to try to cure the ills, to try to deal with the ills of colonization. And as we've been challenging Laura, we realize as colonizers that we also have a role to play in decolonization. The one thing we absolutely need to do is to learn the truth. We all were brought up with myths, and now it's time to learn the truth about our history. That it's not the pretty picture of the Pilgrims landing on Plymouth Rock and welcoming and, the first Thanksgiving. We need to truly understand what the truth is and then commit ourselves as the colonizers to making the changes that need to be changed.
Absolutely. I remember Russell Means once gave a speech, and it was at I think the commemoration of the landing of the Pilgrims, and he said something to the effect that on this date they landed at Plymouth Rock. He said it'd been better if Plymouth Rock had landed on them. And in many ways, that is so true. And I understand that. I feel the same way in a lot of ways. Not because, we call it myths that we were told, as Barbara said, but actually most of it's just plain lies. Right. You can forget the myth part. It's an absolute lie. I remember seeing the beautiful pictures in the history books and, of all the white settlers and the Puritans and how wonderful society was, but never saw the struggles of the eastern tribes and the horrors that were visited upon them. And then I started reading, when I was very young, books about Pontiac and Black Kettle and all the native chiefs in the east and the Iroquois Confederation, the Algonquins, and how advanced, how wonderful it was, and they lived together in peace and harmony. And then we come along. It's not a pretty picture, and it's not certainly the one we were given. So we have to admit the lie, number one, and then work to change it, working with indigenous peoples together so that we can, have something for the future.
Have something for the
worthwhile.
future. Yeah, when we learned that colonization really restructured the political and economic relationships of the indigenous people, and that people just want the opportunity to be free, to be themselves, to live authentically, to be free and happy. And what I hear over and over is it's all about the land. So how do we go back and do some kind of create justice out of injustice? What do we do?
What? Are you asking me?
Yes.
I don't know.
Give us the magic pill.
Give us
all the answers.
We need the magic.
I know.
I don't have any answers direct. I mean,
well, think of your tribe for a moment. What do you need?
Oh, well, for one, we need I would like our land back.
Thank you.
Okay, there you go.
That's it.
I don't know. It's been such a struggle for me because I love people. I don't care who you are, where you come from, what color your skin is. And not just that. I look at people and their differences and their cultures. I'm more supportive of other people's cultures than I've ever been allowed to be of my own. And I think that's because mine was taken away from me. So it's hard for me to look at people and think, I don't want you here anymore. And I'm pissed off. Excuse me. I'm upset. I'm angry that you're here and I don't want you to be here anymore. I mean, it's hard for me to have these feelings in my heart towards people. And it's nothing personal. And at the same time, it is very personal because these things, people are allowed to enjoy things in this land that I have never had the opportunity to enjoy, like the pipeline that threatens our tribal lands in Oregon are supposedly going to go through sacred sites that I've never even seen or heard of before. And I think that's it's completely unfair in a lot of ways. And it's hard to try to explain to people. And when I get angry and people are telling me, don't be so angry, and that makes me even more furious because why am I not allowed to be angry? Why am I not allowed to feel however I'm going to feel? Because I certainly let everyone else have that opportunity. I give everyone else that freedom to, if you're angry, be angry. If you're mad about something, you're upset, express that. I mean, I understand people go through different things, and I also understand that people are here and had nothing to do with the first people who came over in this, in the ships and took over this country and this land. And at the same time, some of them are descendants of the people who were. It's just a very complicated, confusing subject for Indigenous people in general. And then you add to the fact that I wasn't even allowed to grow up knowing my own culture. And that's because of, for many different reasons. And it's not anyone's fault. I don't know how else to explain it. Like, I can't point a finger at anyone living today and say it's all your fault. It's more of like I'm saying, this is what happened to me. It directly affected me because of my father's drinking and all of the other things that happen around me. Our people not able to stand on our own 2 feet, not able to function in this society that was created around us. That directly affects my children because I've suffered from depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, and other things that I've had to experience. That affects my ability to parent my children. And without the language or being able to explain to myself why I feel like a failure, why I feel like less of a human being, it's hard for me to figure out how I'm supposed to raise my kids as, just people in general. I mean, they are not getting the benefit of my culture either, but the broken pieces of things that I'm telling them. And as I'm learning, and at this point now, half of my kids are so grown they don't really care anymore because, they're already who they're going to be. For the most part, that part of their life, their culture was not offered to them because it wasn't offered to me. And that has damaged our relationships in a big way.
I think I'm not as forgiving as you are because of the fact that it's still happening. And no one is speaking out hardly from this end where I'm sitting as much.
I don't know that you can say I'm forgiving. I have to function. I have to move through life. And I'm learning things and I'm trying to take it on as it goes. And I am angry. Don't get me wrong.
Angry.
I just can't, because of the depression that I've suffered with my entire life, it's hard for me to give in deeply to a lot of these thoughts anymore because I need to be able to go to work. I need to be able to raise my kids. I need to be able to function in this community and be able to give something to this community while I'm here. And part of that has become, my culture and my background, my experiences. In this community in Savannah, I live in one of the most impoverished neighborhoods in Savannah, and it's because of after I moved away, I moved into black neighborhoods. I was raised by black people, and I embraced their ways, their culture, for what little they have left as well. But it was just, that's another product of colonization, and you're disbanded from your whole people, and we move away. Sometimes a lot of us move away, and we're forced to integrate into other people's cultures. But for myself, I've always appreciated everyone else's culture. I've always given them that respect, because I know how hard it is to walk through life without your own identity. So
yeah. One of the words that came to us a couple of times today as we were reading and researching was indigenous resurgence. And I've thought about that a lot since reading it for the first time, and particularly, again, the challenge it poses for all of us, for us as the colonizers. And you're right, Albert, it's not myths, it's lies. The lies we were taught that we need to really work hard to discover the truth, understand the truth, and understand how we need to stop perpetuating the lies, how we need to start talking truth. And yet there's also a challenge to indigenous people. One of the great quotes we came is that there's a challenge for indigenous people to resist and not acquiesce to the colonizing culture, and to teach their children to become more indigenous, to look at them and say, yeah, you were forced to grow up in this colonizing culture, but now it's time to take back your culture. And we need to grow a new generation of indigenous leaders. In fact, what I heard today was what I've heard with the Black Lives Matter movement. Hey, you white colonizers, take a seat back, be our allies, but let us lead. Let us take the lead in this particular struggle. So in addition to the land, let's say we could come up with a way of, moving land from one set of ownership to the other, or a novel idea of changing our whole relationship to the land where we don't own it anymore. We use it, and we use it together, and it isn't something I own and let you use. It's something we all use. It's all part of the commons. What other kinds of things can we be doing for this indigenous resurgence?
I don't know. I was thinking of that today when I was thinking. I've been learning a lot of anarchism, and I think that growing up, I didn't know I was an anarchist in a lot of my thinking. But it somewhat differs a little from indigenous resistance, and I haven't quite figured that out. We talk about no borders, and that's something I've been thinking of. But how, and I haven't quite figured out how to explain it, because I haven't explained it to myself. What?
No, I have something here for you to read later.
Oh, good.
That will help you with that problem. I promise you. It's very, very good.
I mean, well, we talk about indigenous land and giving indigenous people back the land. And then we talk, on the other hand, I'm learning about using the land as community. And how do you go about doing that when indigenous people are so tied to the land, and we need this land to survive and to relearn our ways, like the fishing rights and the gathering rights, and just existing on the lands that we were born onto. How does that affect that whole idea? Yeah. And so that's something I was just reading earlier today and thinking, further thinking, because I've been thinking about a lot of different things lately. I just haven't had a lot of time to put them into words.
Well, you're doing a great job putting them into words right now. We all had the opportunity today to listen to a presentation, and I'm going to let Albert pronounce his name because you do it so well.
Tayaki Alfred, and I had trouble with Alfred more than the other part. He is of course, indigenous. He's a professor at University of Victoria in Canada, and I've listened to 2 or 3 of his presentations now. He is phenomenal. He explains things so easily and so readily, and what's required that all of us have to do. You've got 520-something odd years of
525
years of indigenous resistance, and that is an accomplishment in itself, that you're even at 1% still here, because all the odds were against you from the very beginning. And we were in Asheville for the Anarchist Book Fair. And we met there, Ward Churchill. And he stood up and he said, "What are you all still doing here?" You know? And that was a really a good point to start on. Why are we still here? And he said he understands now at this point that we're not going to leave. I think he's gotten the idea. He said that we're here. So his one request was that we begin to understand the indigenous culture and to start living it. The earth is our mother, and to treat us that. We've got farmers that love land. They own the ownership of the land, but the real land can't be owned. There's no, you can't own, you wouldn't sell your mother. You wouldn't treat her the way that we treat the land. So his request was that we begin by understanding the native way, the indigenous people's philosophies about life and about everything, and in that way we might be able to survive together. And that made sense to me in a way, and the Taiki kind of emphasized that point all the more, that is a requirement. If we go on the way we are with the way we're treating the land, there is no hope, period. We're all going to just disappear. So,
Well, you made me think of a comment that was brought up to me in a conversation. We were talking about decolonization and what I was doing, lately. He said that many tribes have taken over other tribes, and he went on to describe one tribe that had taken over another tribe and incorporated them into their tribe, but still let them live their ways or have some of their cultural ways, which I was at that point understanding that he didn't understand at all what colonization truly meant. I mean, yeah, we did that. We warred with each other. It's not something that we're trying to hide. I mean, every people warred with each other because that's just what we did. I don't claim to understand any of that. But the other thing that he asked me was, could we use a different word other than decolonization so it wasn't so offensive? And if he's listening, I'm not picking on you, I swear. But I thought that was interesting because I don't think people really understand what the word colonization means. And you definitely don't understand what it means to an indigenous person if you can bring up that kind of a question to me. I just want people to understand that it's not like we want to fight. We're tired. I mean, a lot of us are exhausted from 525 years of resisting. But it's not like we just want to fight with everyone and we want to make a fuss. Every time we have to stand up to say something, it's exhausting. I mean, from mascots to costumes to our land and our water rights and existing it's a tiresome fight. Something
T-shirts and novelty stores.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I would love to bring that one up. My drunken. What was it? My indigenous name or my Indian name is Drunk Falls Down Drunk. I think that's in one of the two of the stores down here in Savannah. Yes. Thank you, by the way, for your cheap T-shirts. It's something I struggle with, and yes, I want to get out there and stand up against that and speak out, but everything becomes a fight at that point. And I think focusing on decolonization is a good place. Colonization, first of all, people need to understand what it means, and we have been completely taken over in this land to the point where we are less than 1% of the population. And if you can't understand that, then I don't think that you ever will.
Right.
On our own land, and we're still here. And decolonization is a process where, yes, it starts with indigenous people because this is our land, and wherever you are is pretty much a land that was occupied by other people that we didn't give it up willingly. Don't think that we just like laid down and said, okay, sure, you can have it. We were manipulated and lied to, and the language barrier was huge. I mean, yeah, some people understood and some people were educated on the English language, but really our languages, I mean, even if you're thinking in like Spanish, you don't say things the same way. Things don't mean the same. There's not words for all things in all languages. There's some things that we've had to kind of make do with and try to explain. There's also
the cultural differences in the words that we use. So.
Yes. So, I mean, it's not like we just laid down and said, okay, here. We didn't sign over the deed to our country, our land. So that's one thing. And so decolonization is something we also need to learn. Once you learn what colonization really entails, decolonization is something that we need to explore, because it's not just good for indigenous people, it's good for all people. Don't you want to survive? I mean,
That's it.
The land is its mother to all of us. We all, every single species comes from this planet. I mean, think of all the millions and billions of things that grow out of the earth and go back into the earth when we die. We are all a part of this this planet. So it's not just indigenous people that are going to benefit. It's just that we want to be acknowledged on our own land. And we are still here, and that's something that I can't stress enough. People don't know. Here in Savannah, I think I've met 3 people recently, and one I don't even really talk to, but 3 indigenous people. And some with indigenous blood, but they really don't know, they don't have a way to, they don't know their culture any more than I do. I mean, honestly.
Well, you're with the Mothers of Resistance, and you're also a water protector, and the ceremonies at the water, and when you stand down there at the river, one of the most polluted rivers in the entire nation is the Savannah River, and the lady from England the other day who said she knew that because she could smell it. We can't, because we live here, we get accustomed to it, but coming from that perspective, and then you look at it and what's been done to it, it's horrible from one end to the other. It's just an ugly thing. And I remember when I'm standing there thinking often what it must have been like when the ship sailed down filled with colonists, how beautiful it must have been, how pristine. You could drink from the river, you could eat the fish from the river. Now, no one would want to even dip a finger in the river.
I was just thinking
but no telling what would happen. And that's just in a few years. And the people who lived here, the Yamacraw and the other surrounding tribes, no longer are here. They don't exist. They've been absorbed into different cultures and different things, and they're just not here. The horror that has been visited on people. But I think there is another new colonizer, capitalism now, because it's making all of us enslaved. Yes, and we all need to resist that as well, and that affects all of us. Period. I mean, no matter who we are, we're all affected by that. There's only a select few, as in the colonists in the old days. A select few benefited while the many died, and the brutality with which the indigenous peoples you met the brutality of the colonization. And I don't care if anyone likes the word or doesn't like the word, strive to understand it. If you understand the word colonization, you will begin to hate the word, period. It has never done anything good anywhere on the face of this earth, and we have to get that mindset, that colonization mindset, out of our minds. We have to start working to decolonize. We have to begin with ourselves. We have to decolonize who we are.
I think capitalism is, like you said, the most dangerous enemy that we're facing. And I think that's going to be the biggest challenge in trying to decolonize, because we are so enslaved by the system that was created, years before any of us that live here now. Yeah. It even spans centuries. It didn't even start here. It's just something that was brought here to us. But I think that's it's going to be difficult to try to decolonize, because we're not just fighting the system, but people who perpetuate the system as well. So
the biggest enemy we faced, you remember when we went down into Chetiskoan, and that night, late at night, there was a different feel. It's like I entered a different world, a different realm. You had people working together. You had indigenous peoples and non-indigenous peoples. But there was a unity of spirit there. Everyone wanted to accomplish something. Who was the enemy there? The enemy was the capitalist system. It was the pipelines. It was the oil companies. It was the government, the sheriff's office, the Army Corps of Engineers, the National Guard. Everyone aimed at us. When we saw the cannons up there, the joke was, they're going to shoot popcorn. We're going to show a movie. Well, we know that wasn't the intent.
Yeah, we were the movie.
We were the movie, yes. And I learned probably some of the most important lessons of life in late January, early February there in Standing Rock, when I got to really become totally involved. And I saw the side of indigenous peoples that I'd always imagined, but was never able to be totally a part of. But there were people there who were, I don't know how to say it, but it was a different world. And that's the world I would want to see for everyone here now, not the world in which we're living now, but that world. And that world doesn't mean you have to go back to teepees and caves, but although I still like the idea, it doesn't mean you don't have to do that. So you have to take the traditions of the old, meld them with the new, and let us build a new world together.
Yeah.
It's the only way we're going to survive at this point in time, because we're all victims now.
I think for indigenous people to decolonize, we first need to go home.
I agree.
And learn our culture, relearn our languages. That's important. And it's not, and like I said, it's not personal to anyone, and yet again, it is very personal. And I don't know if anyone can understand that but me, but we need to go home. We need to recapture, in a way, what we can of our culture and start there. And that might require us to disconnect a little bit maybe from this society, but I think that's very necessary.
When Tataige said that the goal was to teach the children to be more indigenous than you are.
I think we just need to remember that we are indigenous.
And teach your children the language and the culture that you never had a chance. Make sure they understand it and are immersed in it. That was one of his solutions, and it's a great, great way of thinking about. And I remember the song Barbara and I played it several times recently, from Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young from the old days. Teach the children, because if anything is going to be sustained, it has to come from the bottom up. What is the bottom? The children. And that's the only way we're going to solve this problem and work together.
Well, I'd like to share that on Memorial Day, I'm going to be doing a walk from 37th and MLK down to River Street, and I'll be starting at 11 o'clock to memorialize my indigenous ancestors and the ancestors, the ancestors that built this town. This town was built on the backs of slaves, and I want to honor them as well. If anyone's welcome to walk with me, I'll start at MLK and West 37th down to City Hall, and I'll be down there at 12 o'clock. You can find the event on Mothers of Resistance. That's my own way of celebrating Memorial Day for the people.
Facebook page, Mothers of Resistance.
Yes. And for us colonizers, in addition to waking up to what colonization and decolonization is, our challenge is to recognize and reject the evils of colonization, in addition to capitalism, militarism, institutional racism, consumerism, materialism, sectarianism, nationalism, individualism, and the one unism is patriarchy. And this is our challenge, to erase these isms and to follow the lead of the indigenous people, the few that are left here, and find a way to live together with justice, because the system we have now is just not acceptable.
Memorial Day.
Yes.
For
so
us.
Before we sign off, we want to let you know that Voices of Resistance will be pre-taping a show on Thursday, tomorrow, that will air on the real Memorial Day, May 31st, entitled "Do Not Thank Me for My Service." We will have two veterans who will talk to you about what it feels like to be thanked for their service. And I really think this is, again, as we look at the isms of colonization, militarism is certainly very high on the list. So thank you so much for listening today. You're listening to WRUULP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with a global soul.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you
Yes,
for having me.
Thank you, Laura.
You're listening to WRUU-LP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are